Her arms had stopped feeling anything at mile 900. The crew was in tears. The doctor said her body was shutting down. She looked at him, nodded, and slid back into the black water. Day 1. You stand on a boat ramp at 4 a.m. The Pacific is black and cold and endless. 900 miles of coastline stretch ahead of you, not as a metaphor, as a swim. Your support captain, a sun-cracked man named Davies who's crewed for a dozen endurance athletes, watches you stretch. He writes something on a scrap of paper and folds it into his jacket. 3 days. That's his bet. You hit the water and the cold takes your breath like a fist. The first stroke hurts. The second hurts. By the 100th, something shifts. Your body stops screaming and starts negotiating. It whispers, just today, just finish today, and you do. You pull yourself onto the boat at dusk, shaking. 11 miles done. 889 to go. Davies hands you broth without a word. His eyes say what his mouth doesn't. She won't last the week. Week 1 passes. You learn that 900 miles is not one decision. It is 900 decisions. Every morning, the same negotiation. The body says no. The ocean says nothing. It doesn't care either way, and you slide in. Again. Davies starts a logbook, stroke rate, distance, rest intervals. By day 5, he notices something that makes him tap his instruments and frown. Your stroke rate isn't declining, it's climbing. You don't know about the logbook. You don't know Davies is watching you like a problem he can't solve. All you know is the water, the cold, the rhythm. Stroke, breathe, Your world shrinks to 6 feet of ocean in every direction. And inside that tiny world, something is growing quiet. The voice that used to scream quit every morning is getting softer. Not gone, just tired of being ignored.
Day 12, Davies radios you during a rest float. How's the shoulder? You know what he's really asking. You've seen the others, the ones who smiled through week 1, then crumbled at week 2 when the adrenaline burned off and all that remained was the grind. The shoulder's fine, you say. Ask me something harder. He clicks off the radio. You hear him laugh. It's the first time.
Day 18. You surface for a breath and the sky is wrong. Green-black clouds stacked like bruises on the horizon. The wind shifts. Davies's voice crackles over the radio, urgent now, no laughter. Storm system moving in fast. I'm calling a pause. Get on the boat. You look at the clouds. You look at the water. You feel the current changing under you like something alive waking up.
You look at Davies across 30 feet of churning water. His face is practical, certain. Stop. Wait, be smart, and you hear yourself say words you didn't plan. Every day I stop is a day I have to decide to start again. I'd rather not give myself the choice. Then you pull your goggles down and go under. Davies watches your cap disappear into the gray chop. He doesn't radio again.
That night, Davies sits alone in the cabin. He replays her words. Every day I stop is a day I have to decide to start again. He thinks about his own life, the marriage he let erode by taking breaks from trying. The business he paused and never restarted. He looks at the folded bet in his jacket pocket. 3 days. She's on day 18, swimming through a storm. Because stopping costs more than continuing ever could. Here is what no one tells you about sustained commitment. Neuroscience research on habit and endurance has revealed something extraordinary. The brain physically restructures itself around repeated behavior. Neural connections that go unused weaken. They lose their insulation, their signal strength, their speed. Meanwhile, the circuits you fire again and again are reinforced, myelinated, made faster. Your brain rewires around your choices. The longer you commit, the quieter the quitting voice becomes. Not because you're tougher, because your biology adapts to your decisions. You are not fighting willpower every morning. You are training your nervous system to stop offering the exit. Day after day, the door marked quit gets harder to find. Not locked, just forgotten. That is what's happening inside your skull right now on day 18, swimming through a storm you chose not to pause for. Day 34. A marine biologist named Chen joins the support crew to document the physiological effects. She's quiet, precise, fascinated. She clips sensors to you during rest stops, takes blood, measures everything. You barely notice you're somewhere else now. Somewhere between the pain and the rhythm, a place that didn't exist on day 1. A place you built stroke by stroke. Chen watches your data and starts calling colleagues.
Day 61. Chen pulls Davies aside. She shows him a graph on her tablet, a curve that should be declining but isn't. Her body stopped fighting the water, Chen says, tracing the line with her finger. Look at the lactate. Look at the cortisol. She's not enduring anymore. She's collaborating with it. Her physiology adapted to something we thought was purely mental. Davies stares at your distant figure, small against miles of coastline. He reaches into his jacket.
He pulls out the folded paper, 3 days, written in his own hand 2 months ago. He tears it in half, then again, lets the pieces fall into the Pacific. Chen watches him. What was that? She asks. Davies doesn't answer right away. When he does, his voice is rough. A bet I made against someone I didn't understand yet. He grips the railing and watches you swim. Mile 700 and something, still choosing.
Day 89. Your shoulder finally tears. Not a metaphor, a partial rotator cuff tear that makes your left arm feel like it's filled with broken glass. The doctor on the support boat says stop. Chen's data says stop. Davies says nothing. He just looks at you. Waiting, you know what stopping means. It means waking up tomorrow and deciding again. It means finding that door your brain already forgot. You tape the shoulder. You choose the water. The last day, mile 900, no crowd, no cameras, no finish line tape, just ocean turning to shallows, turning to sand under your feet. You stand up in waist-deep water and walk the last 20 steps to shore. Your legs shake, your shoulder screams, and you turn around, face the Pacific that held you for 3 months. It doesn't applaud, it just keeps being the ocean. But you are not what you were when you entered it. So let me ask you something. What's your mile 900? Not the dramatic sacrifice, not the single heroic moment. The thing you keep choosing every morning. When the alarm fires and the bed is warm and nobody would blame you for stopping. 900 miles is not one decision. It is the same decision made until your brain forgets there was ever another option. You don't become unbreakable in a moment. You become unbreakable in the repetition, the daily return to the water. You don't find out what you're made of at the beginning. You find out at mile 900 when every reason to stop is true and you choose the water anyway. Subscribe to Forge Your Iron Mindset. The Iron Mindset. "1,009 rejections. He was 65 years old, sleeping in a Cadillac, and he hadn't quit yet. Most people fold at 3. 5:14 a.m. A rust-colored Cadillac sits in a motel parking lot outside Salt Lake City. Inside, not a motel room, he can't afford that. Inside the car, a 65-year-old man in a pressed suit wakes against the driver's seat. His back screams. His neck is locked sideways. In the trunk, a pressure cooker, a paper sack of flour and spices, and a handwritten recipe he's memorized so deeply he could recite it dying. Today is day 312 on the road. He has been told no 1,007 times, 1,007 doors, 1,007 handshakes that led nowhere. 1,007 times he repacked that pressure cooker, smoothed his tie, and pulled back onto the highway. Yesterday, 4 no's in 6 hours. The day before, 3. He is running out of towns. 6:40 a.m. He pulls into a gas station, washes his face in the restroom sink. The mirror shows him a man most people would call finished. White hair, deep lines. 65 years old with a social security check he never cashed sitting in his glove box. 3 weeks ago his daughter called, said, "Daddy, come home. You proved your point." He said nothing for 10 seconds. Then, "I haven't proved anything yet, sweetheart. That's the problem."
8:20 a.m., first stop. A steakhouse on the main drag. The owner, mid-30s, dark slicked hair, charcoal suit, clean-shaven jaw like a magazine ad, sees him coming through the glass door and leans to his assistant. Watch this. The old man with the chicken, again. He lets him talk for 4 minutes. Then, sir, we're a steak house. We don't do chicken. Have a good day. Door closes. 1008.
9:50 a.m. A diner called Hank's. The owner tastes the chicken, pauses, says it's good, real good, then, but I can't change my menu right now. Maybe next year. The old man nods, shakes his hand, walks to the car, sits behind the wheel for 2 full minutes without starting the engine. His hands are shaking, not from fear, from something worse. From the whisper that says, maybe they're all right. 11 a.m. Rejection 1009. A barbecue joint. 1140, 1010. A truck stop cafe where the owner actually laughed and said, "Buddy, you're 65, go fishing." He smiled back, said, "I appreciate the advice." Then he got in the car, drove 14 miles to the next town and kept his hands steady on the wheel. 14 miles of silence.
Here is what no one tells you about rejection. Your amygdala, the part of your brain that processes threat, fires every single time someone says no. The first 100 no's feel like being punched. The body floods with cortisol. The chest tightens. Every instinct screams, stop exposing yourself to this. But research on repeated social rejection shows something remarkable. If you keep acting after the no, if you don't withdraw, the brain recalibrates. The threat response dampens, not because you stop caring, because your nervous system learns a new truth, rejected and still here.
1:15 p.m. He pulls up to a small diner on a nothing road in a nothing town. The sign is hand-painted. The parking lot is gravel. A woman stands behind the counter, late 40s, auburn hair pulled back tight, flour dusted across her apron, hands that have scrubbed skillets since she was 16. She looks tired, the kind of tired that lives in your bones. She watches him walk in carrying that pressure cooker like it's a newborn, and she doesn't smile, but she doesn't look away either.
He doesn't lead with the pitch this time. He's too tired for performance. He just says, "Ma'am, I've been driving 300 days. I've been told no over 1,000 times. I'm not here to waste your afternoon. I just have something people love when they taste it, and I haven't found the right person yet." She looks at him for a long moment. Then she says the 4 words that will change both their lives. "Let me taste it."
He cooks it right there. The smell fills that tiny diner, and under 10 minutes, a secret blend of spices, the pressure method, the way the skin crisps just right. She takes a bite, chews slowly, doesn't speak for 15 seconds that feel like 15 years. Then she sets the fork down and says, "My customers would lose their minds over this. When do we start?" 1011 doors. 1 yes. 3:40 p.m. He sits in his car outside her diner. The agreement is handwritten on a napkin. He stares at it. His hands have stopped shaking. For the first time in 312 days, the silence in the car doesn't feel like failure. It feels like the start of something that took 1,000 no's to earn. He starts the engine. He still has 6 hours of daylight. There might be another yes out there today. 10 years later, dozens of countries, thousands of locations. The woman's diner, that nothing road, nowhere town diner, became franchise #1. She never sold it. Ran it herself until she retired, richer and freer than she'd ever imagined a Tuesday afternoon could make her. The young businessman in the charcoal suit. He drives past one of those restaurants every morning now. He has never told a soul about the day he said no to the old man with the chicken.
And here is what the 1,000 no's actually built, not just a business. They built a man who could not be stopped by a word. Every rejection he survived without quitting rewired his brain to hear no differently. Not as a wall, as a filter. The people who said no weren't blocking his path. They were clarifying it, pointing him, one closed door at a time, toward the one that would open.
So here's what this means for you right now, today. That thing you're building that nobody believes in yet, that pitch that got laughed at, that dream your family calls unrealistic over dinner. You are not being rejected. You are being trained. Every no is your amygdala learning that you don't die from disappointment. Every closed door is making the next knock easier. And the yes, your yes, doesn't need to come first. It just needs to come once. You don't need 1,000 people to believe in you. You need one starting with yourself at 5 a.m. when the bed is warm and the world is quiet and every comfortable thing whispers stay. He was 65. He slept in his car. He had nothing but a recipe and the inability to stop. If that man can knock on door 1011, you can knock on the next one. And if you've been grinding with us since file 1, you already know. The door opens for the people who refuse to leave the hallway. 1,000 no's didn't break him. They built the machine. Subscribe to Forge Your Iron Mindset, the Iron Mindset. What happens when two people build their entire identity around destroying each other?
Elias won that race 4 years ago. He should have moved on. Champions chase records, not ghosts. But something about the way Marcus ran, reckless, furious, almost beautiful in his refusal to pace himself, lodged in Elias like shrapnel. He started training against Marcus in his mind. Every interval, every hill repeat one thought, is he doing this right now? Is he out there at this hour too?
2 men, 2 cities, training harder than anyone around them can explain. Their coaches worry. Their families don't understand. They grind past the point of reason, not for money, not for glory, not for a medal they can hold, for a face on a wall. And the next question is the one their coaches keep asking. Can obsession like this actually build you, or does it just devour you? Competitive psychology has a term for this. Researchers studying head-to-head rivalry found that athletes with a specific, named rival, not an abstract goal, not a personal best, a real human face, outperform those without one by a measurable margin in high-stakes moments. They call it the rival effect. Your body doesn't rise to vague ambitions. It rises to a person, someone you refuse to let win.
3 months before the championship, Marcus rewrites his training. He stops running what his coach programs. He starts running what he believes Elias would fear: longer intervals, shorter rest, deeper pain. His coach warns him, "You'll overtrain and miss the race entirely." Marcus replies with one sentence. He's doing more. He doesn't know if that's true. He can't afford to assume it isn't.
Same month, different city. Elias tears a muscle in his hip flexor. The doctor says 6 weeks off. Elias rests 11 days. He tapes himself together, grinds through dawn sessions on painkillers, and tells no one how bad it is. His training partner asks why he's risking his whole career. Elias looks at the photograph on the wall, because he wouldn't stop. I won't be the one who blinked.
Championship qualifying rounds. Both make the final. Both seeded in the same heat. For 4 years they've lived in each other's heads, projecting, replaying, imagining. Now they'll share a starting line for the first time since the race that broke one of them and haunted the other. But the real question has shifted. It's no longer who's faster. It's, what have you become because of the person you couldn't forgive? Race night. A stadium under floodlights, rain misting across the track. Marcus walks in first, leaner than 4 years ago, carved down to wire and intent. He doesn't look at the other lanes. Elias arrives later, broader, more powerful, hiding a limp nobody catches. They're placed 2 lanes apart. Neither speaks. Neither looks over. But both feel exactly where the other one is standing. The gun fires. For 200 meters, nothing separates them. At 400, it's a stride. The crowd roars, but neither man hears it. Marcus runs the race he's rehearsed 10,000 times in that Detroit basement. Elias runs against the phantom he built across 4 years of solitary mornings. And the answer nobody expected arrives. The race is almost anticlimactic. They are perfectly, terrifyingly matched. Marcus crosses the line 2/100ths of a second ahead. 2/100ths after 4 years, 2 cities, 10,000 hours of solitary fury. Elias finishes and folds over, hands on knees. Marcus doesn't celebrate. He stands on the track, chest heaving, staring at nothing. The crowd expects something, a fist, a scream, tears. There's only silence, because the race, they both realize now, was never really the point.
Beneath the stadium, a concrete tunnel. No cameras, no crowd. They pass each other walking opposite directions. Elias stops. Marcus stops. 4 years of silence between them. Elias speaks first, quietly like a confession he's rehearsed longer than any race. I had your photo on my wall. Rain echoes from the open end of the tunnel. Marcus stares at him. 3 full seconds. Then, barely audible, same.
One word, same. And 4 years of hatred folded into something neither man expected, not friendship, not warmth, something harder and rarer. Recognition. Each had given the other the one thing no coach, no medal, no paycheck ever could, a reason to keep pushing when every cell screamed stop. Marcus chose to let that word out. It cost him his armor. It gave him something heavier, a mirror. So answer this tonight. Who gets under your skin? Whose success makes your jaw tighten? Whose name you pretend doesn't bother you? Stop lying to yourself about it. That tension, that burn when they win something you wanted is the most honest fuel you will ever find. You can let it rot into bitterness and waste it, or you can tape that face to your wall and outwork your own ceiling. That's your choice. Nobody makes it for you. Marcus went home that night and took the photograph down. Not because he'd moved on, because he didn't need the paper anymore. The rival was inside him now, permanent, fused into his standard. And that's the lesson the Iron Files keep proving episode after episode. Your enemy was never across the room. They were the standard you couldn't set alone. The photo's gone. The rival stays. Subscribe a new story like this every evening. He went 94-0. Then he spent every single day of his final year making absolutely certain someone would end that streak. And he chose the hand that would do it.
There's a letter in a gym locker in Colorado. Handwritten, 3 pages, never sent. It starts, "You won't remember the day I decided to give you everything. You were 19, eating a gas station sandwich in the parking lot, chalk still on your hands. I watched you through the window and thought, there it is. That thing I lost somewhere between Title 4 and Title 7.
His name doesn't matter. Call him the record holder. 9 years at the top of a combat discipline where fractions of a second separate gold from forgotten. He'd beaten every ranked competitor on 4 continents. His technique was studied in academies across 3 countries. His highlight reel had more views than most athletes' entire careers. Untouchable, unreachable, and he was starting to realize unmoved.
What nobody tells you about being the best is how quiet it gets. The hunger that built you gone, replaced by maintenance. You train to not lose instead of training to discover. Every morning I taped my hands the same way, drilled the same combinations, and felt nothing. I was a museum exhibit of my own prime. People applauded the memory of me while I stood right there, disappearing.
He'd stopped growing. Not because he lacked discipline, he had more discipline than anyone in that building. He'd stopped because nobody could push him. His record wasn't a trophy anymore. It was a cage with a comfortable mattress. He performed for a ghost of himself, and the applause sounded like an echo bouncing off something hollow. That's when the kid walked in. 19 years old, unranked. Technically rough, dropped his guard on the inside, telegraphed his right hand, reset his feet too wide. But he moved with something the champion recognized from old footage of himself at 17. A recklessness that only exists when you have absolutely nothing to protect. Raw hunger that hasn't been contaminated by success or fear of losing what you've already won.
I sat across from you in the office that smelled like rubber mats and old sweat. You were fidgeting with a water bottle cap. I said, I'm going to teach you everything I know. You're going to break every record I have. You laughed. You thought I was testing you. I wasn't. I was trying to save the only thing left worth saving, the part of me that still wanted to be surprised.
Training started at 4:50 in the morning, before the city woke. The champion took apart his own technique, piece by piece, and handed each fragment to a kid who barely understood what he was receiving. Footwork patterns refined over a decade. Timing secrets he'd never shared with his own coaches. Counter sequences he'd kept locked in his head for championship rounds. He held nothing back, and something strange began to happen. Science calls it the protege effect. When you teach a skill with genuine intent to create mastery, not casually, but seriously, your own understanding reconstructs itself from the ground up. Studies consistently show that people who teach retain dramatically more than those who rely on passive review alone, because explaining forces your brain to find and fill every gap. The champion wasn't giving his knowledge away. He was rebuilding his own foundation, brick by brick, from a deeper blueprint.
The kid noticed it first. "You're different," he said one morning, toweling off sweat, chest heaving. "You're faster than the competition tapes. Way faster." The champion said nothing. But that night, he replayed his own footage from 6 months prior and saw a crispness in his combinations he hadn't carried in 3 years. Teaching hadn't drained him. Teaching had woken something up that winning had put to sleep.
The hardest thing I've ever done wasn't winning the title. It wasn't defending it 7 times in 4 years. It was watching you improve week after week, faster than I ever did, and choosing not to hold back the last 10%. Every instinct screamed, keep something for yourself, protect your edge. That instinct, that's not wisdom. That's fear wearing a coach's jacket, and I was done wearing it.
Months ground forward. The protege climbed the rankings, 17th, 9th, 4th. Journalists called the champion's phone with questions that tasted like vinegar. Aren't you worried he'll surpass you? You're training your own replacement. What happens to your legacy? He'd hang up, stare at the ceiling fan cutting slow circles. The honest answer was yes, he was worried. And that was exactly why he couldn't stop. His legacy was on the table now. 30 years of sacrifice. A childhood spent in gyms while other kids rode bikes. 2 reconstructed knees. A marriage that couldn't survive the obsession. Everything compressed into a number on a scoreboard. And he was actively helping someone erase that number. The cost was his entire identity. The thing he'd used to answer the question, who are you? Then came the session that broke the frame. A Tuesday, nothing special about it. The protege attempted a combination the champion had explicitly told him was too dangerous. A timing sequence that left you open for a full second, exposed with no recovery angle. The champion leaned forward from the corner, ready to correct. Ready to say, I told you not to try that. The kid landed it, clean. Faster than the champion had ever executed it in competition. The mechanics weren't just correct, they were evolved. Something the champion had considered impossible at full speed, done casually on a Tuesday morning by a 20-year-old with chalk on his hoodie. The champion stood there, felt something he hadn't felt in years, surprise. Then delight, pure, unguarded delight.
I wasn't wrong to teach you. I was wrong to limit what could be taught. I gave you my ceiling and called it the sky. You looked at it and said, politely, without knowing you were saying it, that's not a sky, that's just a roof with a nice view, and you punched through it. That's when I understood what I was actually building, not a replacement, a continuation.
March, a cold arena packed loud enough to vibrate in your sternum. The protege, now 20, stood in the center looking nothing like the fidgeting kid from a gas station parking lot. Calm, measured, carrying a decade of borrowed wisdom behind chalk-dusted hands. He broke the record, not by a fraction, by a margin that made the arena go silent before it went deafening. 9 years of history rewritten in under 3 minutes. And in the back row of the upper deck, alone, in a torn navy jacket with tape still on his hands, the champion sat, crying. Not from loss, not from pride exactly, from something rarer. The feeling of watching a wall you spent your whole life building become a floor someone else stands on. He'd spent 30 years climbing. This was the first time he'd ever lifted someone higher than he could reach.
You'll hold a record one day and feel the cage close around you. When it happens, and it will find the hungriest person in the room and give them everything. Not because you're finished, because that's how you discover you were never finished at all. So the next time you're gripping your edge so tight your knuckles ache, remember what it cost him to open his hands and what it gave him back.
The ceiling was never the ceiling. It was just the beginning. If these stories sharpen your edge, if they remind you what you're building and why, subscribe. A new story like this every evening. Your body is not the weak link. It never was. Everything you thought was a physical limit was a neurological illusion your brain built to protect itself, and it has been lying to you your entire life. A research clinic on the coast of Iceland. Bleached white walls humming with fluorescent light. Outside, glacial wind tears across black volcanic rock. Inside, a driven researcher, early 40s, sharp cheekbones, auburn hair pulled into a tight bun, stands over 2 water tanks. She spent 11 years asking one question: why do some bodies survive freezing cold while identical ones collapse?
She designed a clean experiment. 2 male volunteers, both 28, same body fat percentage, same cardiovascular fitness, same cold exposure history, near identical on every measurable axis. She'd submerged them chest deep in water held at 2 degrees Celsius, just above freezing, and record exactly when each man broke, and why. On paper, they should break at the same moment.
The first morning, both men stepped into the tanks. The water hit like a wall of shattered glass. Breathing seized. Heart rate spiked past 140. Muscles locked rigid. For 90 seconds, their bodies responded identically, the same gasping, the same shock, the same primal animal panic screaming one word: out. 90 seconds of pure, indistinguishable suffering. At 4 minutes, the second volunteer, strong, capable, no weakness on any chart, began shaking so violently the water sloshed over the tank's rim. His jaw clenched until his teeth cracked against each other. At 7 minutes, he begged to be pulled out. Here's the thing that haunted her. His core temperature had barely dropped. His organs were fine. His body wasn't failing. Something else quit first.
The first volunteer, the stoic one, shaved head, thick short beard, pale skin turning the color of raw marble, sat perfectly still. His breathing slowed to long, measured draws, his eyes fixed on a single point on the far wall. 10 minutes. 15, his hands rested open on the water's surface. He didn't grip anything. He didn't fight.
20 minutes. 30. The medical team shifted behind the observation glass, exchanging glances. The researcher checked the monitors. The stoic volunteer's core temperature had dropped, yes, but within survivable range. His heart rhythm held steady and strong. At 45 minutes, she called it, not because he was in danger, because she had completely run out of explanation for why he wasn't.
They wrapped him in thermal blankets, handed him warm fluids. His hands were blue-gray, lips drained of color. But when the researcher leaned in and asked how he felt, the stoic volunteer looked at her with calm, absolutely clear eyes and said 5 words that would reshape her entire career. I stopped calling it pain.
The researcher went back to the data, ran every comparison she knew: muscle density, nerve conduction velocity, metabolic rate, prior cold adaptation. Nothing explained a 6-to-1 difference in endurance. Nothing even came close. On every metric that mattered, these 2 men were the same person. One lasted 7 minutes. The other lasted 45. The answer wasn't anywhere in the body.
In the debrief, she pushed harder. Walk me through what happened in your head after minute 5. The stoic volunteer paused, rubbed his jaw. Around minute 3, my brain started telling me I was dying. Loud, certain, every nerve screaming that I had seconds to move. He looked down at his recovered hands. I just didn't believe it. I noticed my body was still working, the stoic volunteer said, voice low and steady. Heart beating, lungs pulling air. Fingers moved when I told them to, so I made a deal with myself. I'd trust what was actually happening over what my brain was predicting. The cold didn't change, but the story I told myself about it did, and that changed everything.
Here's what researchers studying extreme environments have found. In most endurance failures, cold water, brutal heat, high-altitude ultramarathons, the body still holds significant physiological reserves at the exact moment a person quits. The muscles aren't depleted. The organs aren't shutting down. The brain fires the quit signal early, a massive safety margin built into your wiring. So large it becomes a cage you never knew you were sitting in. The researcher understood the data. She'd published papers on it, but understanding something from behind glass isn't the same as knowing it in your bones. She'd watched hundreds of people break, measured their collapse in spreadsheets and heart rate graphs. She'd never once felt the voice herself, the one the stoic volunteer had described, the one that lies with absolute, unshakable confidence. She needed to hear it.
3 weeks later, the researcher stepped into the tank herself. No observation team behind the glass, no thermal blankets pre-staged, just her, the water, and a clock on the wall. She understood the cost, If she was wrong about everything she'd spent her career studying, she was alone in water that could kill her. She exhaled once and sat down.
90 seconds in, the voice arrived. Not a whisper, a full-volume scream from somewhere deep behind her ribs, every cell insisting she was in immediate danger. Her hands clawed at the steel edges, lungs stuttered and hitched. At 2 minutes, her legs trembled so hard the water splashed across the floor. Every instinct firing one single, overwhelming command: quit. Now, quit. 3 minutes, she almost stood. Her vision narrowed to a gray tunnel. The voice wasn't arguing anymore. It was pleading with her, desperate, using her own memories against her. This is the exact moment most people leave. Not because the body has failed, because the mind presents failure as an absolute certainty, a done deal you'd be a fool to argue with.
The researcher did what the Stoic volunteer had done. She checked, heart beating. She could feel it hammering against her sternum, lungs pulling air, ragged but working. Fingers, she wiggled them, still hers. She unclenched her jaw, let her shoulders sink below the surface, and whispered the simplest sentence of her 11-year career: "You're lying, I'm still here."
22 minutes later, she climbed out, shaking, blue-lipped, exhausted to a depth she'd never known existed, but upright. Not because her body was tougher than the man who lasted 7 minutes, it wasn't. She'd simply stopped obeying a voice that had no evidence. The body she'd studied for 11 years had been capable all along. The cage was never the cold, it was the story. So the next time you're grinding at 5 a.m. and every cell says stop, when you're deep in the work nobody sees and that voice sounds so certain you should quit, do one thing: check. Are your legs still moving? Is your heart still beating? Then the voice is lying, and you do not obey liars. Remember what the researcher learned the hard way: the body was always ready. You just have to stop believing the bluff. The voice lies, the body endures. Subscribe a new story like this every evening. The fighter who screamed outlasted the silent one, every single time.
2 men, same iron discipline. One swallowed every breath. One let his voice cut the air like a blade.
Vocalizing at peak effort boosts force output, not emotion biology. A pressure valve you were built with.
You've been told to suffer in silence, but silence is just pain with nowhere to go. The scream isn't the break, it's the choice to stay. Subscribe, a new story like this every evening. Chaplain standing by, a brass band for every milestone. The press called Cross the man who would own the sky. Washington was quietly funneling more resources his way every month. Mercer's program was one bad flight away from cancellation, and every soul on that base felt the clock ticking. Hale didn't politic, didn't charm. He just showed up before dawn and ran the checklist like a prayer. He memorized every procedure so thoroughly he started catching errors the engineers missed, a hairline crack in a fuel line invisible to the eye, a pressure gauge calibrated 2% too low, a rivet pattern that didn't match the spec sheet. Mercer noticed, not because Hale was gifted, because the system made real competence impossible to hide. In a speech-driven culture, a small-town mechanic stays invisible forever. In Mercer's system, the man who knew the machine best rose to the top. 6 months in, Hale was named lead pilot. Pause for a second. Think about the last time someone tried to motivate you, a boss, a coach, maybe a video exactly like this one. Did it change what you actually did the next morning? Or did it burn hot for an hour and dissolve by lunch? Mercer understood something most leaders spend a lifetime missing. Motivation is a wave. It rises and it crashes and it leaves you standing on the same shore. A system doesn't care if you're inspired. It doesn't ask how you feel. It only asks one question. Did you do the work? That question, stripped of comfort, stripped of emotion, is the most honest gift anyone has ever handed you. Here's a detail most people don't know. As a plane approaches the speed of sound, shockwaves build over the control surfaces and the stick goes dead. You're falling at over 600 miles an hour in a metal tube with no steering. Hale felt it at 92, 3 full seconds of nothing. The yoke limp in his hands, the horizon tilting. Then the controls came back. His hands didn't shake during the flight. They shook that night alone in his bunk, staring at the wall, considering for the first time what it would mean to walk away. What Hale didn't know, what nobody on the base knew, was that Mercer had already staked everything. The week before, he'd handwritten a letter to the high command, not a request for more time, a guarantee. Break Mach 1 within 30 days or I resign my commission. 30 years of service folded into an envelope sealed with wax, mailed from the base post office while everyone slept. If Hale failed, Mercer's entire career was ash. But he never told Hale, never tried to fire him up with the stakes. He walked into the hangar that morning and asked the only question his system allowed. Did you run the checklist? 2 weeks before the scheduled attempt, news rolled in from the north like a storm. Cross, the favorite, the ace, the magazine cover, had pushed to Mach 97 and lost control. Aileron flutter ripped the wing clean off. The plane cartwheeled into the desert. Cross survived barely. Shattered collarbone, grounded indefinitely, program frozen. The speech and courage approach had sent a man screaming toward a wall on adrenaline and applause. And no one had built a process to catch the flutter data sitting in their own telemetry logs. It had been right there, in the numbers, waiting for someone to look. The morning of the flight, Hale woke up with 2 cracked ribs. He'd fallen breaking a horse the evening before, stupid, reckless, the kind of off-duty accident that ends a program. The base doctor said the G-forces passed Mach 95 could drive a fractured rib into his lung. Hale had a choice. Report it, delay the attempt maybe permanently, with Washington already drafting the cancellation memo, or stay quiet and climb into that cockpit knowing his own body might betray him before the barrier ever did. He said nothing. He taped his ribs, pulled the flight suit over the bandage, and walked across the tarmac into the cold desert dawn. Before first light on the day of the attempt, Hale climbed into the rocket plane, a bullet-shaped coffin bolted beneath a heavy bomber's wing. At 25,000 feet, they released the clamps. He dropped. Free fall for 2 sickening seconds, then he lit the 4 rockets and the Mojave shrank beneath him. Mach 88, 92, the stick went dead, 3 seconds, 4. Then at 96, the controls bit again. The engineers had redesigned the entire horizontal tail based on Mercer's failure autopsies, every crash traced, every fracture cataloged. The system had predicted this moment. Mach 98, 99. Then a crack like a whip across the sky, and the needles swept past 1.0. On the ground, Mercer heard the sonic boom roll across the flat desert floor like distant thunder, the first time that sound had ever reached human ears from a controlled flight. He didn't cheer, didn't pump a fist. He reached into his breast pocket, pulled out a small leather notebook and wrote one line, Mach 1.06, stable, airframe intact. Around him, engineers were throwing hats, shouting, grabbing each other. Mercer walked to the radio shack alone, dialed Washington and spoke in the same flat voice he used for supply requisitions. The barrier is broken. Recommend Mach 1.5 testing next quarter. No victory speech. The system had delivered. That was the speech. Here's what Mercer proved on that desert, something most people still haven't absorbed, even 80 years later. You don't rise to the level of your motivation. You fall to the level of your systems. Every pilot on that base had courage. Every one of them believed. But belief without structure is just a beautiful way to crash. So the next time you're staring at a goal that terrifies you, the business, the training, the career pivot, the thing that wakes you up at 3 a.m., stop searching for a speech to get you fired up. Build the checklist. Run it every single morning. And let the system carry you past the exact point where feelings quit. Hale flew 31 more missions after that morning. Mercer never once told him he was proud, just handed him the next checklist, the next procedure, the next impossible number. Years later, Hale said those checklists meant more to him than any medal he ever wore, because they were honest. They didn't flatter. They just asked him to show up and do the work. If you're grinding through something right now that nobody sees, building in silence, running your own checklist when it's thankless and dark, this one was for you. The checklist broke the barrier, not the speech. If you're done waiting for inspiration, subscribe. This is your crew. I'm Cole. Subscribe, a new story like this every evening. His legs are gone, his vision tunneling. The crowd falls silent because they think they're watching a man die, and he's thinking about the next stride. 3 months before the race, a biomechanist named Dr. Voss stood in a university corridor under buzzing fluorescent light. He held up a laminated card for the documentary cameras. On it, a single time printed in bold black ink. "This is the thermodynamic ceiling," he said, tapping the card with one finger. "Oxygen uptake, lactate threshold, cardiac output. I've modeled every variable the human body can produce over 26 miles. This number cannot be beaten." He lowered the card. "It is an opinion, it's physics. Now jump forward. Race night." A city course carved through rain-slicked boulevards, neon signs bleeding color across the wet asphalt, red, blue, gold, like the road itself is on fire. 40,000 runners packed behind a start line. And somewhere in that sea of bodies stands a 28-year-old named Elias, lean as a blade, close-cropped hair, a plain dark red singlet, no sponsor logos, no GPS watch on his wrist, no pace plan in his pocket, just 3 years of preparation for a number a scientist swore was the end of the road. Rewind, the night before the race. A hotel room 12 floors above the city. Elias sits on the edge of the bed, bare feet on the carpet, city glow pouring through rain-streaked glass. Someone has slid a printout under his door, a copy of Voss's paper, key sections highlighted in yellow. He picks it up, reads every graph, every equation. He's read this paper dozens of times before. He folds it once, sets it on the nightstand beside a glass of water, and turns off the lamp. He already found what he was looking for 3 years ago. 3 years earlier. A public library at 2 in the morning. Elias hunched over a table buried in photocopied journal articles, a cold cup of coffee beside him, yellow highlighter bleeding through cheap paper. He wasn't reading Voss's study to accept it. He was reading it to crack it open. And on page 14, he found the flaw. Voss had modeled the human runner as a thermodynamic machine. Inputs, outputs, energy yield, heat dissipation. Beautiful math, flawless logic. But nowhere in 14 pages of equations was there a variable for the moment a human being decides they are not finished. Dr. Voss was not a villain. Understand that. He was careful, methodical. He'd spent 11 years at the outer edge of human performance, measuring what the body could and couldn't do, and his models had never once been wrong. When colleagues challenged him at conferences, he didn't argue. He opened his leather notebook and pointed to the data. "I don't set limits," he'd say, cleaning his wire-rimmed glasses with a handkerchief. "I find them. Nature decided long before I arrived." He booked a flight to race night. Front row observer seat, pen uncapped, expecting confirmation. The starting gun fires. The pack surges forward into a canyon of rain-slicked city blocks, neon advertisements reflecting off the wet road like spilled paint, electric blue, hot pink, amber gold. Elias tucks into the lead group, settling behind his pacer, a veteran named Tomas. The first 5 miles are controlled, measured, breathing easy. The splits come in from the sideline and every single one lands right on Voss's number. Not faster, not slower, exactly the ceiling. Elias breathes through his nose. He's patient. His race, hasn't started yet. Here's what separated Elias from every other elite in that field. He trained without technology. No GPS watch, no heart rate strap, no algorithm pacing his intervals. While the rest of the world's best chased digits on a screen, Elias chased feeling. He ran by breath, that ragged edge where the lungs burned but didn't crack. By the sound of his own footfall on gravel before dawn. His coach stood on the sideline once, arms crossed, frustrated. "You cannot manage what you don't measure," the coach said. Elias laced his shoes tighter. "That's exactly the point." Pause. "I want you to sit with something for a second. When was the last time you stopped, not because your body gave out, not because the task beat you, but because a number told you to? A grade, a salary band, an age, a rejection count, a doctor's estimate. How many of your ceilings were actually yours, and how many did you just borrow from someone who measured the world once and decided you fit inside it?" Elias asked himself that question every morning for 3 years. And every morning, the answer tightened his jaw a little more. Mile 15. The rain thickens. Neon reflections on the road blur into smeared rivers of color beneath their shoes. Elias's legs are louder now, not failing but reporting, every tendon checking in. Tomas glances back over his shoulder, scanning Elias's eyes for the flicker that says he's fading. Elias gives him one tight nod. They push. The split at mile 16 comes through from the sideline, and for the first time in the race, they are 3 seconds ahead of Voss's number, 3 seconds past the published ceiling. In the grandstand, Voss looks down at his stopwatch, uncaps his pen, writes nothing. Voss had watched 14 major marathons from seats exactly like this one. Clipboard on his knee, pen in hand, and every single time the wall held. The runners slowed right where his equations said they would, mile 18, mile 20, the body's obedience to physics. He'd built an entire career on that certainty, that predictability. But 3 seconds is 3 seconds. He flips to a clean page in his leather notebook, writes the split, underlines it twice. Somewhere deep in the part of him that was once a young man who loved running before he learned to measure it, something stirs. He pushes it down. Mile 22, the wall. Tomas's right leg locks mid-stride, quad C's done. He stumbles, catches himself on the barrier, and waves Elias forward with one desperate hand. "Go, now, don't look back." And just like that, Elias is alone. No pacer, no shoulder to draft behind, no rhythm to borrow, just wet asphalt, neon, and the sound of his own breathing filling the space where Tomas used to be. The split call comes from the sideline, and the number is ahead of Voss's ceiling. Not by 3 seconds anymore, by 11. Elias has never been past that number. No human has. Something shifts deep in his chest, and he does not slow down. This is the threshold most people never reach. Not because their bodies can't carry them there, but because their minds file the paperwork first. The quiet negotiation. The internal voice, reasonable and calm, whispering, "You've done enough. Nobody expected you to be here. Slow down, protect what you've already built." Elias hears it. He hears every careful, sensible word, and he lets it speak. He doesn't fight the voice. He doesn't argue with it. He just keeps running. Past the voice. Past the number. Past the version of himself that a paper on page 14 said was the final draft of what a man could be. Here's a fact that might rewire the way you see every wall you've ever hit. In 1954, a young middle-distance runner broke the 4-minute mile, a barrier the scientific community had declared a hard physiological ceiling. The world called it a miracle, one man, one freak performance at the outermost edge of human capacity. And then, within 3 years, 16 other runners broke the same barrier. 16. Same species, same legs, same lungs. Nothing had changed in human biology in 1,000 days. What changed was the story. The wall was never in the body. It was in the agreement. And the moment one person stopped agreeing, the wall stopped existing for everyone. Mile 26. The final turn. Elias rounds the bend and the wall of crowd noise hits him like a physical force. 70,000 voices bouncing off wet concrete and glass towers lit by neon. His legs are gone. His vision has narrowed to a tunnel with light at the end. His arms swing loose, barely controlled. But his feet keep striking the asphalt. One, then the other, then again. The clock on the gantry above the finish line shows a number that does not exist in any published paper, any biomechanical model, any careful scientist's notebook. Elias crosses the line, falls to his knees on the wet road, and the clock stops. In the grandstand, Dr. Voss stares at his stopwatch. The number on the screen matches the gantry. It is real. He reaches into his overcoat pocket and pulls out the laminated card, the one he's carried to 14 races, the one with the time printed in bold ink, the ceiling he called physics. He uncaps his pen, draws one slow, deliberate line through the old number, writes a new one beneath it, then closes his leather notebook and sits very still. He doesn't look defeated. He looks released, like a wall he didn't know he was living behind just came down around him too. Elias never saw him do it. He didn't need to, because the ceiling was never on that card. It was in the moment you read someone else's math and decided it was about you. So the next time you hit a wall in the gym, in the business, at 4 in the morning when every part of you says stay down, remember what happened on that wet road. The ceiling is wherever you stop looking up. If you're grinding through something nobody sees right now, this one was for you. I'm Cole. Subscribe, a new story like this every evening. Talent doesn't rise under pressure. It shatters. And the greatest dynasty in their sport proved it in front of the entire world. A stadium at night. 90,000 voices merged into a single roar that vibrated through the metal seats and the wet grass and the bones of every player standing on that pitch. A penalty shootout. The final of the world's biggest tournament. One side, a dynasty in white jerseys, record holders, names that children whisper when they kick a ball against a garage wall. Across from them, a team nobody had picked to survive the opening round. A small nation with no trophies, no stars, no history worth printing. Just a goalkeeper standing on the line, rolling his neck slowly, calm as a man waiting for coffee. 20 yards from the pitch, a man in a dark tracksuit stood with his arms folded. 53 years old, gray stubble on a weathered jaw, eyes that had watched football from sidelines most commentators couldn't find on a map. He'd never won a trophy that made the evening news. His name wasn't in anyone's phone. But 14 months ago, he'd walked into a federation office carrying a 70-page document. Not tactics, not formations. One subject, a single, obsessive question. How do you teach a human being to function when every nerve in his body is begging him to fail? That man was the coach. And tonight, he was watching his answer stand on the goal line. On the other side of the halfway line, the veteran waited. 31 years old, broad shoulders, slicked back hair darkened by the rain, the white jersey clinging to a frame sculpted across a decade of elite competition. He'd scored in cup finals, lifted trophies with confetti still in his hair. He'd taken penalties in front of 80,000 people and placed them like he was sliding a letter under a door, precise, calm, dismissive. He believed he'd handled pressure before. Fully, honestly believed it. He was wrong. He'd handled success. Success dressed up as pressure. The real thing was still a stranger to him. 14 months earlier, a training ground on the outskirts of a city that smelled like diesel exhaust and wet concrete after dark. No floodlights worth the name, just a few halogen lamps buzzing above Apache pitch. The coach stood in front of 23 players who earned less in a year than the veteran earned in a single week. He looked at them for a long time. Then he said something nobody in that room expected. "We are not going to try to become more talented than them. That door is closed. We are going to become more prepared for the worst moment of our lives, and we are going to start tonight." He started with sound. Borrowed 2 industrial speakers from a local event company, stacked them along the touchline, and played recordings of hostile crowds at full match volume. 90,000 throats screaming through cheap drivers until the speakers rattled. Then he made his goalkeeper take penalties inside that wall of noise. The keeper was 22, lean build, close-cropped hair, a green jersey 2 sizes too big. His name doesn't matter, you'll understand why. The first night he missed 4 out of 5. The coach filmed every miss, played the footage back in the team room with every teammate watching. The kid wanted to disappear into the floor. The coach sat beside him and said, "Good. Now you know what it feels like. Tomorrow we do it again." He timed the walk from the halfway line to the penalty spot and made the goalkeeper walk it over and over, 100 times in a single session, until the 40-yard march felt like muscle memory, not a funeral procession. He wasn't training a kick. He was training a nervous system. He was building a man who could function inside chaos because chaos had become ordinary. Here's what most people never learn. Teams that simulate real penalty pressure in training, the crowd noise, the cameras, the filmed failures, the walk, the staggered timing, win shootouts at significantly higher rates than teams that simply practice the kick in quiet. The gap is real and it is measurable. Pressure is not character. It's not heart. It's not something your mother gave you or God decided. Pressure is a skill, like a first touch, like a header, like reading a flight of a ball. It is trained or it is not trained. There is no middle ground. There is no winging it. The coach understood this the way an engineer understands gravity, not as an opinion, but as a law. Pause. I want you to think about something. Think about the last time you walked into a room, a conversation, a deadline, something you were certain you could handle, and it hit different. The air was colder. The stakes were suddenly real, and your hands did something your mind couldn't explain. That gap between what you've practiced and what you've practiced under pressure, that invisible inch, is the gap that decides championships, careers, and the moments you'll remember when you're old. Most people never close it. They don't even know it exists. The coach knew. He spent a year closing it in a kid nobody had heard of. Back to the stadium. The shootout is 3 kicks deep. The score is level. The rain has thickened into something that blurs the floodlights into halos of white and blue. The veteran steps forward, rolls the ball in his hands, places it on the spot with the care of a man setting a diamond. His run-up is famous: 3 steps, plant, strike, clean as a sentence. He scored this kick 10,000 times in training and matches in his sleep. 90,000 people hold their breath. 20 yards away, the coach in the dark tracksuit does not hold his. He doesn't need to. He already knows what's coming. The veteran looked at the goalkeeper, saw a kid from a country he couldn't place on a map. No pedigree, no history, no right to be standing on that line in this match on this night in front of this many people. He didn't feel fear, that's important. He felt certainty. And certainty is the most dangerous thing a human being can carry into a pressure moment, because certainty is comfort in a mask. It whispers, "You've done this before." It conveniently forgets to mention that you've never done this exact weight, this exact silence before the strike, this exact version of the moment. The veteran had practiced the kick. He had never practiced the moment around it. 3 steps, plant, strike. The ball left his boot and he knew. Before the crowd, before the net, before the camera flash, he knew. Too much power, not enough corner. The ball sailed wide, not by a meter, by inches, but inches in a penalty shootout are the distance between legacy and footnote. The stadium cracked in half, one side erupting, the other collapsing into silence. The veteran stood at the spot, hands on his hips, staring at the grass as if the ground owed him an explanation. He'd hit that exact kick 10,000 times, but he'd never hit this one. This one had pressure in it, real pressure, and he hadn't trained for that. The coach didn't move, arms still folded, rain running down the creases of his face, pooling in the collar of that dark tracksuit. He watched his goalkeeper stand up from the dive, roll his neck, the same slow roll he'd done 1,000 times on that training ground, and walk back to the line. The same measured steps, the same quiet hands at his sides. The coach had seen this walk so many times it was like watching a film he'd directed. 14 months of repetition had turned terror into Tuesday. The kid wasn't brave. Bravery is what you need when you're not prepared. He was just ready. And readiness looks like calm the way a loaded spring looks like stillness. The next penalty came. The goalkeeper dove left not because he guessed, but because he'd studied. 400 hours of penalty footage the coach had compiled and cataloged, drilled into instinct until reading a striker's hips was as automatic as blinking. The ball hit his gloves and the sound was small, almost gentle, a quiet thud swallowed instantly by the roar that erupted around it. The coach closed his eyes, not from relief, from recognition. He'd built this exact save in a room nobody would ever see. A cold pitch, borrowed speakers, a kid in an oversized jersey. And now the whole world was watching that invisible work arrive in public for the first time. The dynasty fell, not because they lacked talent. Talent had filled that stadium to the last seat. They fell because one side had rehearsed brilliance and the other side had rehearsed what happens when brilliance isn't enough. The veteran walked off the pitch slowly, the white jersey dark with rain and sweat, and he passed within 3 feet of the young goalkeeper. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. They both understood the same truth from opposite ends of it. One had prepared for the kick. The other had prepared for the pressure that surrounds the kick. And pressure on that night was the only thing that mattered. So think about this the next time you're grinding through something nobody sees. The early alarm, the repetitions that feel pointless, the practice session with no audience and no applause and no one who will ever know you were there. That cold training ground was the shootout. Those borrowed speakers blasting crowd noise at a kid in a green jersey, that was the final. It already happened, months before the stadium. The moment that matters is always decided before the moment arrives. You're not wasting time in that empty room. You're not spinning your wheels. You are building the save that changes everything. If you felt that, if you're in your own version of that training ground right now, doing the work nobody claps for, walking a distance nobody will ever measure, you belong here. This is where people who refuse to flinch come to remember why. You're not alone in the grind. You never were. If you're grinding through something nobody sees right now, this one was for you. Talent fills the stadium. Preparation decides who leaves it. I'm Cole. Subscribe, a new story like this every evening. 14 years, 0 wins at that stadium. 52,000 people ready to watch them lose again. They led by 18 at the half. Different coaches, different squads, different decades, same ending. The home side didn't just win at that ground, they fed on it. Visiting teams would arrive sharp, warmed up, prepared on paper. By the 20th minute, something unnamed would settle over them. A tightness in the chest, a half-second delay on every decision. The ball felt heavier. The posts looked narrower. The locals had a word for it. They called it the fortress. And no one could explain what it actually was. The young captain had been appointed 6 months earlier. Late 20s, lean build, short-cropped dark hair, jaw like a squared-off brick. He didn't give speeches. He gave instructions specific, calm, one task then the next. When reporters asked him about the fortress record, he blinked, didn't look it up. He'd studied the fixture list, formations, tendencies, set play percentages, not legends, not history. To him, a rugby field was grass, posts, and a clock. Just arithmetic. The veteran had been there for all of it. 10 years. 4 losses at that ground, each one stored somewhere below the neck, in the shoulders, the gut, The way his jaw locked when someone said the stadium's name. Mid-30s, broader build, weathered face with deep-set eyes that looked like they'd been tired since his 20s. Tape wrapped around both wrists always. He didn't talk about the fortress. He didn't need to. His body had memorized every exit. The night before the match, the veteran sat alone in his hotel room. Curtains drawn tight. He could hear traffic 4 floors below, ordinary life carrying on, unaware that tomorrow mattered to him more than he'd ever admit. He replayed the exits. The try conceded in the 78th minute 2 years ago. The knock-on in the rain that ended everything the season before. His hands opened and closed on the bedspread. Not stretching, processing. His body was already playing the match, and already losing it. A knock on the door. The captain stood in the corridor, late 20s, lean, short-cropped dark hair, tracksuit zipped to the chin, holding a water bottle like it was a clipboard. "Can I come in for a second?" He sat on the edge of the spare bed, elbows on knees. No small talk, no motivational warmth. Just a man with a question. "What's the field like there?" "Anything about the surface I should know." Simple, practical, like asking about the weather before a run. Veteran looked at him. Looked at this kid who carried no scar tissue from that place. No inherited dread. No phantom noise in his ears from a crowd that hadn't roared yet. And something in the plainness of the question, the way it treated the fortress like a pitch report, made the veteran pause. He almost told the truth, almost said, "It's different there. The air is thicker. The posts look narrower." Instead he heard himself say, "Same grass as everywhere else." He didn't believe it. Yet, match day. The bus pulled into the car park at 4:30. You could hear them through the concrete, 52,000 already inside, a low living hum that vibrated in the chest before you even saw the pitch. The veteran felt it in his sternum, that old frequency. The captain stepped off the bus, bag over one shoulder, and looked up at the stadium the way you'd look at an office building you'd never visited. Neutral, functional. He said nothing. He walked toward the tunnel. During warm-up, the difference was visible if you knew where to look. The veteran's footwork was sharp, precise, but his eyes kept drifting, to the stands filling in waves, to the banners, to the far end where the home supporters packed tightest, already singing something old and territorial. The captain ran the same warm-up he ran every single week. Same sequence, same tempo. He didn't look at the crowd once. Not discipline, not courage. He simply had nothing to look for, no data to fear. 7 minutes in, it started. A penalty to the home side, soft, marginal, the kind of call that goes with the crowd. The referee's arm went up and 52,000 voices hit at once. Not a cheer, a declaration. The sound didn't bounce off the walls, it pressed down like a change in air pressure before a storm. The stadium was saying what it always said. This is how it goes. This is what happens here. You already know the ending. The veteran felt his shoulders tighten. He knew this feeling the way you know a recurring dream familiar before it finishes arriving. The crowd surges, the chest locks. Decisions start coming a half-second late. You don't choke, you just stop being fast enough. He looked across the field and saw 2 teammates exchange a glance. The kind of glance that doesn't need words. The kind that says, "Here it comes again." The fortress doing what fortresses do. The old story, reading itself aloud. Then he looked at the captain, and the captain was already pointing. Already calling the next set play, hand signals crisp, voice flat, cutting through 52,000 people like it was a Tuesday training session. Calm as a man doing long division in a quiet room. No recognition of the noise. No fight against it. Just absence. The myth couldn't find a surface to land on. The veteran stared at him, and something in his chest unlocked. Not inspiration. Something colder, more useful, permission. Pause. Think about the last time you walked into something you'd already decided you couldn't win. A job interview where you'd been rejected before. A gym session where the weight beat you last week. A conversation you'd already rehearsed losing. You weren't afraid of the thing itself. You were afraid of the story you'd built around the thing, the one that felt like a memory, and memory feels like truth. But memory isn't prediction. It's just a filing system with a bias toward pain. 12 minutes after the penalty, they scored. The veteran carried the ball into contact, hard, direct, the kind of carry he'd been making for a decade, got hit, recycled. And the captain was there on the next phase, threading through a gap the home defense left open because they were still performing for their crowd instead of reading the play. The ball went wide, then over the line. A stunned half-breath of silence. Then noise, but different noise. Confused noise. The sound a story makes when it stutters. They scored again 8 minutes later. This time the veteran set it up, a read he'd never made at this ground because he'd never been calm enough to see it. The angles were always there. The space existed every single year he'd visited. He'd just never been still enough inside to find it. The scoreboard changed. The home crowd tried to push their team forward with volume, but the sound had changed pitch. It wasn't pulling anymore. It was pushing, and pushing is panic wearing a mask. By halftime, they led by 18 points at the Fortress. The stadium went a strange, disoriented quiet, the kind of silence that only arrives when a story stops working mid-sentence. Not angry quiet, not deflated quiet, confused quiet. The kind where 52,000 people look sideways at each other and wonder if they'd been watching the same fixture they thought they were watching. The scoreboard was real. The myth, apparently, was not, and nobody in the building could explain the difference. In the dressing room, the veteran sat on the bench with his hands still, palms down on his thighs. The captain was already at the whiteboard, marking second-half adjustments like a man finishing paperwork. Teammates hydrated, taped, talked the ordinary mechanics of a game going well. The veteran didn't move. He was sitting inside a silence that belonged to him, not the bus ride silence, not the hotel room silence. Something new. The silence of a man who has just stopped agreeing to a contract he never signed. Here's what I finally understood about that night. The Fortress was never the stadium. It was never the 52,000 voices or the concrete or the floodlights. It was a story, told so many times by so many people that it hardened into something that felt like architecture. And the veteran didn't lose there 4 times because he wasn't good enough. He lost because he kept agreeing to the story. The captain broke it the simplest way possible. He never read the book. If you're grinding through something nobody sees right now, this one was for you. A fortress is just a building until you believe in its walls. Remember that. The next time you walk into the room where you've always lost and your chest tightens before anyone speaks, the walls aren't real. Your agreement is, stop signing the contract. I'm Cole. Subscribe, a new story like this every evening. He chips ice off the hull at 3 a.m., hands bleeding while the other men sleep, not because anyone ordered him to, but because the ship will sink by morning if he stops. A 22-foot wooden lifeboat, patched with oil paint and seal blood, riding 40-foot swells in the coldest ocean on Earth. 3 men crammed inside. One who led, one who navigated by stars he could barely see through the spray, and one who said out loud months earlier that they were all going to die out here. That boat is the scoreboard, but the score was written in July in the dark when no camera was rolling and no headline existed. Rewind. A ship wooden-hulled, rigged for polar waters locked in Antarctic pack ice. July, the dead center of the southern winter. Imagine a sound at 3 in the morning, the hull groaning like something alive is squeezing it between 2 fists. 27 men in bunks they can't leave. Outside, -30. Darkness that swallows 20 hours of every day. The expedition was supposed to cross the continent on foot. Instead, the continent swallowed them whole. The ice chose when they moved, and the ice chose not yet. The captain was 40 years old. Broad-shouldered, dark beard going gray at the jaw, a heavy wool coat he never seemed to take off. Steady dark eyes that gave nothing away. He'd sailed to the ice before twice. Both times it nearly killed him. He understood something the younger men hadn't learned yet. Panic doesn't arrive on a single dramatic day. It seeps. It enters through boredom first, then silence, then the small arguments about nothing. Who moved whose boots, who snored, who looked at whom wrong. So the first week they were stuck, he made a decision that looked insane. He built a schedule. Every morning, breakfast at 8, no exceptions. Chores until noon. Afternoon, football on the ice, actual football with makeshift goals carved from crates and rules nobody fully agreed on. Evening, music. One man had a banjo. Another could sing. The captain insisted on all of it. Not because he loved banjos, because routine is the wall between a sane man and a broken one. You don't notice the wall until it's gone, and by then you're already on the other side. Some of the crew laughed. One man didn't. The carpenter was the oldest man on the expedition. Early 50s, stocky, hands gnarled from building boats since he was 14, thick gray beard, suspicious narrow eyes, a heavy canvas work jacket stained with decades of tar and salt. He trusted wood. He did not trust optimism. 3 months into the freeze, he said it plainly, standing in the middle of the mess deck where everyone could hear. "We're not getting out of this." He knows it. He just won't say it. The captain was 10 feet away. He heard every syllable. He said nothing. The navigator was something else entirely. Lean, sharp-featured, wire-rimmed spectacles, clean-shaven every single morning even in the cold. He shaved because the captain shaved, and he understood why. Discipline in the small things is a message to the mind about the large ones. His job was to calculate their position. Every day. Even though the ship couldn't move an inch under its own power, the pack ice drifted slowly, invisibly, and the navigator tracked it, plotted it, filled a leather journal with coordinates nobody asked for, numbers for a journey that hadn't started yet. One pattern endured across expedition records of that era. Crews that maintained structured daily routine through the idle months showed markedly greater cohesion and survival than those that let discipline collapse. Structure wasn't comfort. It was oxygen, and the captain was pumping it into the room every single day, whether they thanked him or not. 5 months in, the carpenter cornered the captain between the bunks. Canvas walls, nowhere to go. "You're playing games with these men," he said, voice low and hard, football, singing. "You think a song stops ice from crushing this ship?" The captain looked at him, steady dark eyes, no flinch, no defense. "No," he said quietly, "but it stops what the ice does to a man's head." The carpenter spat on the deck and walked out. But that night, the first night in weeks, he sat down at the card game. He didn't explain why. He didn't have to. Pause for a second. Think about the last time you were stuck, not in ice, but in something that felt like it. A career that stopped moving. A training block with no visible progress. A season where nothing you did seemed to register on any scoreboard anyone was reading. And someone told you to just keep showing up. You hated hearing it. So did these men. The difference is they kept doing it anyway, not because they believed it would work, but because the only alternative was to sit still and let the cold win. Sometimes that's all discipline is. Refusing to stop when stopping makes more sense. October. The ice shifted. Not the usual drift, a convulsion. The pressure ridges that had cradled the hull for months turned inward like a closing fist. Timber screamed. Planks split with sounds like gunshots echoing across the white. Black water rushed through the gaps, freezing on contact. The captain gave the order, abandon ship. 27 men climbed onto the ice and stood in a line and watched their home, their shelter, their food stores, their last physical link to civilization sink into the Antarctic Ocean. Gone in 11 minutes. After that, silence. Nothing but white in every direction. No walls, no ceiling, just sky. The captain stood apart from the group. He didn't sit down. He didn't speak for a long time, long enough that the carpenter thought he'd finally broken. Then he gathered the crew into a circle on the ice, wind cutting through every layer, and said 6 words. "We are going home. All of us. Not a hope. A plan." Then he pulled off his gloves and handed them to the youngest man in the crew, a 19-year-old whose hands were already turning white. That cost the captain 2 frostbitten fingers by the end. He never mentioned it. Not once. That was the turn. That was when the carpenter looked at him and saw something he couldn't argue with. Because here is what nobody predicted. The carpenter, the skeptic, the one who called it theater, who told the crew they were already dead, walked to the salvaged wreckage and started working. He reinforced the largest lifeboat, raised its sides with scrap timber, nailed canvas over the gaps, and sealed every seam with oil paint and the blood from his own split palms. He worked for days without stopping, gnarled hands cracking in the cold, gray beard crusted with frost. When someone finally asked him why, he said 5 words: because he gave the gloves. One act of sacrifice unlocked something no tool could reach. And now we're back at the beginning. The patched lifeboat, the Drake Passage, 800 miles of the most violent ocean on the planet. The captain, the navigator, and the carpenter. 3 men who clashed for 10 months, who argued and doubted and resented each other, now holding each other's lives in frozen hands inside a box made of scrap wood and stubbornness. The navigator did what he'd quietly trained for every single silent day on the ice. He shot the sun through a 4-second gap in the clouds and calculated their heading. Those daily coordinates nobody asked for. They were the only map that existed. 17 days. 17 days of waves taller than buildings, of bailing freezing water with a cooking pot, of ice forming on the rigging so thick the boat nearly capsized twice in the night. They didn't sleep. They couldn't. They reached the island but landed on the wrong side, a wall of unmapped mountains between them and the only whaling station that could launch a rescue. No path, no climbing gear, no rope. The captain, the navigator, and one other man crossed those mountains on foot. 36 straight hours of walking through ice and rock. They stumbled into the station looking like ghosts risen from the sea. The station manager stared at them. "Who are you?" The captain said his name. The man's face went white. "We gave you up for dead months ago. No one was looking for you." The captain didn't sit down, didn't ask for water. "I need a ship," he said. "I have 22 men on that island and I am bringing them home." The pack ice turned him back 3 times, 3 failed attempts. On the 4th, he broke through. He reached the island. Every man was alive. All 27. Not a single one lost. In the recorded history of polar exploration, almost nothing like it has ever happened again. So the next time you're grinding through something nobody sees, the early alarm nobody applauds, the reps that don't show up on any leaderboard, the season where it feels like the ice has you and it's never going to let go, remember what happened here. The scoreboard wasn't built when the crowd showed up. It was built in July, in the dark, in the monotony that felt like nothing was happening. Every session in silence is a deposit into an account only pressure can open, and pressure always comes. If you're in your own version of July right now, doing work nobody is clapping for, this one was for you. 27 men, 10 months, no rescue coming, no signal sent, no audience watching, and every single one of them walked off that ice because 3 men who couldn't stand each other chose to build something in the cold when it would have been easier to break. The loudest victories are silent in their construction. The ice doesn't care who's watching, and neither does the man still standing on it. Tomorrow, the woman who trained for a race that didn't exist yet. I'm Cole. Subscribe, a new story like this every evening. In 12 months, he lost his title, his trainer, his marriage, and his reason to get out of bed. 3 years later, 18,000 people paid to find out if he'd found a new one. I'm Cole. I've been telling you stories for a while now about pressure, about the people who stay when it costs them everything. This one's different. This one sat in my chest for 3 years before I could tell it right, because it's not about winning. It's about the 1,000 invisible days between losing everything and hearing the bell again. Let me take you back. 1994. Marcus Cole, 24 years old, 6'3", 231 pounds of speed disguised as power. Heavyweight champion before his 25th birthday. The belt came fast. Magazine covers. A penthouse he never furnished. A trainer who called him son, but only when the cameras were running. 19 wins straight. He thought the ceiling was a myth made up by people who stopped climbing. The first punch I didn't see coming wasn't in the ring. It was a Tuesday. My trainer, the man who'd held the pads since I was 17, walked into the gym with a contract from another fighter. Bigger purse, younger legs. He said, "Nothing personal, kid. It's the business." 3 weeks later, I lost the belt to a southpaw I'd already beaten twice. My right hand never landed clean. Not once. The crowd went quiet like someone had pulled the plug. Inside 6 months, the architecture of his life collapsed. The belt gone, the trainer gone, the money bled out through handlers, a cousin's bad investment, a lease on a gym he never opened. By February, he was selling the penthouse furniture to cover the last month's rent. The phone stopped ringing. The sports pages moved on. Marcus Cole became a question nobody was asking anymore. You want to know what rock bottom sounds like? It's not dramatic. It's not a movie scene. It's a Tuesday morning, 4 a.m., staring at a heavy bag in a public gym that smells like bleach and regret, throwing combinations at nothing. No coach calling time, no corner telling you to breathe. Just the sound of your own fists and the question you can't stop asking. Was the belt the fluke, or is this 14 months in the wilderness? Then a name surfaced, whispered by an old cutman who still owed Marcus a favor. Raymond Lott, 67, trained 3 world champions in the 70s and 80s. Retired after his last fighter died in the ring, a cerebral hemorrhage in round 11 that Raymond blamed on himself for not stopping it sooner. He lived alone above a hardware store in a town nobody drove through on purpose. He hadn't touched a pair of pads in 9 years. He came to my door on a Thursday. Big kid, eyes like a dog that got left on the highway. I told him no, told him twice. I said, son, I buried the last man I trained. I don't have another funeral in me. He didn't argue. He just sat on the step outside my shop for 3 hours in the rain. Came back Friday, Saturday. By Monday, I understood he wasn't asking me to make him champion. He was asking me to teach him how to fight again. That's a different question. The first 3 months, Raymond wouldn't let Marcus throw a punch. Not one. Footwork, balance, breathing. How to stand so the weight sits in your hips, not your shoulders. Marcus, a man who'd knocked out 19 professionals, was shadowboxing like a 14-year-old amateur. And when he complained, Raymond said the thing that broke something open. You learned how to win before you learned how to fight. That's why losing took everything from you. You won fast because God gave you hands like hammers, but hands don't carry you when the legs go. Hands don't help when a man's figured your timing. I'm going to take everything you think you know, your speed, your instincts, all of it, and I'm going to bury it. And then we're going to build something underneath it. Something that doesn't disappear when the crowd does. You understand me? We're building a foundation under a house that already fell down. Pause. I want you to sit with that line for a second. Building a foundation under a house that already fell down. Think about whatever you're grinding through right now, the project nobody believes in, the skill you're rebuilding, the version of yourself you lost somewhere between where you started and where you are tonight. Most people don't rebuild, not because they can't, because rebuilding means admitting the first version was missing something. And that admission, that's the price of the ticket back. 18 months with Raymond. No cameras, no press. A garage gym with a cracked heavy bag and a speed rope held together with electrical tape. Marcus ran the hills behind the hardware store at 5 a.m., not for cardio, but because Raymond said a fighter who can't suffer alone will always fold in public. He sparred with local kids half his size, learning to move without power, to find angles he never needed when his right hand solved everything. Month 22, something shifted. I stopped thinking about the belt. I stopped replaying the loss. I was just in it, the rope, the bag, the hill. Raymond had this thing he'd say when I finally moved right, he'd just nod, once. Didn't say good, didn't say nice, just a nod. And somehow that one nod was worth more than any belt I'd ever held. Because it meant you're becoming something that can't be taken from you, not by a judge, not by a promoter, not by one bad night. 3 years to the month. A promoter called, not a big one, a regional guy who remembered the name, offered a slot on an undercard. 10 rounds against the current number 4 contender. The odds makers put Marcus at 8-1. The headline in the local paper read, "Former champ attempts ill-advised return." Raymond read it, folded it, and said, "Good. Let them think you're buried. Buried things grow." Round 6. The contender is faster than the tape showed. Younger, hungrier in a way Marcus used to be. A right cross opens a cut above Marcus's eye. The old scar splits like it was waiting. Blood runs into his vision. The crowd shifts. He can feel it, that wave of pity from people who come to see a ghost get put down gently. His corner is shouting. Raymond is not. Raymond is just watching, arms crossed, that same still face. And Marcus has a choice. The old me would have loaded up, would have swung for the knockout because that's all I knew, one big right hand to make the blood not matter. But Raymond didn't teach me the right hand. He taught me the feet. So I made the hardest choice I've ever made in a ring. I stopped trying to end it. I gave up the thing I was famous for. I moved. I circled. I made him miss. And every time he missed, I took a piece of him he couldn't get back. It cost me my pride. It saved me everything else. Round 10. The contender is gassed, his hands are low. Marcus doesn't knock him out, he outworks him. Jab, jab, move, jab, the decision is unanimous. And when the announcer calls his name, Marcus doesn't raise his arms. He walks to the corner, leans on the ropes, and looks at Raymond. The old man nods. Once. That's it, that's everything. 3 years, 1 nod. So here's what that costs you and what it gives you. Your first version was built on talent. Your second version is built on truth. And the truth is, anyone can hold a title. Only someone who lost one knows what it actually weighs. So the next time you're staring at something you used to have, a skill, a streak, a version of yourself that broke, remember, the rebuild is not the consolation prize. The rebuild is the real thing. Everything before it was just the rough draft. If you've been grinding through something nobody sees yet, this one was for you. The bell rings twice. The second time you're ready. Subscribe, a new story like this every evening.